Hello and welcome back to the NBA DFS Slate Breakdown for Monday, February 12th. We're in complete NBA land. Now that NFL is totally over, I think we got a fun 9-game slate. We also have some interesting contests on both Draftkings and FanDuel where it is a lower buy-in amount for 150 max. So I think a lot more people going to be maxing today than normally. Last year, I did see some data on the DraftKings contest where 40% of the lineups were from people that were max entering. So we can kind of expect that to happen a little bit today. Now, let's get into the matchups. Before we do, as always, come join us at LionStar, $39.99 per month. And it's only $240 for the year. If you just want to spring for the whole yearly package, you get all our props, all our DFS for all the sports we cover, one low price. All right. We're going to start on good old FanDuel. We got 9 games on both slates and a ton of pretty high point totals. 1, 2, 3, 4... 5, 6 games that are 230 or over, and then you can kind of throw 7 in there because Denver and Milwaukee is 229.5. But then there's 2 games over 240, and they are the 2 late games. So just pay attention to that. You might want some late guys in your lineup tonight. All right. Starting on point guard, highest owned, Trey Jones, Emmanuel Quickley, and Colin Sexton. Got a lot to talk about here. So we got the Spurs versus Toronto, 236 total. Trey Jones is fine. I'm getting a little. I'm just not getting anywhere near the field at this point. And the thing is that it's the Spurs minutes. It's very hard to trust. We have him at 31.5. But over the last 5 games, he's at 29. Over the last 20, he's at 30. I think we're kind of projecting him a little high minute-wise right now. Now, it's an okay spot versus Toronto. Don't mind getting there. I just don't love it, and I think the ownership is just a little bit too high for what his ceiling really is. And kind of same goes for Emmanuel Quickley for me. Look, he's averaging 0.83 fantasy points per minute. He's at 0.88 with Toronto. And I think 7K at that price, even in a good matchup, is just a little too much. He has one 40-point game with Toronto. Pretty much has lived in the mid-30s. And following a chalky 5X is real hard for me. So for that reason, I'm not getting very much of him. Then Colin Sexton, I think his price is great, and his price is getting down to where it should. My issue, 25 minutes, 26 minutes, 24 minutes. So he hasn't been getting that full run of, 28, 29 like he was during, his run of really good games. So I am definitely a little bit wary of going there. And if you go back to his minutes, it's been all of February into January where he's been playing this lower type minute. So I have a real hard time projecting him for 28 right now. I think we should probably be projecting him for a little bit lower. Now that could absolutely bounce back, but when you take into consideration his last 20 starts, he's only at 25.5. I just think we should bring that projection down a little bit in a spot where everybody's going there. So I also am not really going there. It's an interesting slate for point guards where I'm pretty much just taking pivots. Kobe White is one of those pivots. Now, he is probable, but it is a great spot versus the Hawks. Still no Zach LaVine. And so it's a very, very good spot. They're 29th overall in defense versus the point guard. And we know Kobe White has a huge ceiling for his 7.6K price tag. 350s in the last couple weeks. And if you scroll back, there's multiple more 50s there. And he's been in the mid-40s frequently, but has lived in that mid-30s spot. So I think he its potential ceiling spot with the matchup of the Hawks, and I don't mind chasing it at a little lower ownership. Another guy, Chris Dunn. All right, this is an interesting one for me. So the whole reason that I kind of like this, I've been totally scared off by his minutes for pretty much the entire season. But since the trade deadline, his minutes have came up a little bit. 26, 24. Now it could go back down to 18, 20-ish. And in that case, I don't really like him. But when he's getting, close to 24, 26 minutes, I start to find him very interesting. He is a 1.1 fantasy per minute guy, and now he is in a decent matchup. In a matchup that they may want his defense on the court a little bit more when you talk about going against Steph Curry. So I think it's a very interesting spot. And that also could be why he got a little extra run in the last two games. You're going against Booker and Beal for Phoenix, going against SGA for OKC, and maybe that extra minute continues with going against Steph Curry. So I'm very intrigued by low-own Chris Dunn and hoping, his new minutes are a little bit more of the norm because he does, produce on a fantasy level fairly well. Alex Caruso is another one. He's been starting at small forward with all their injuries and playing a lot of minutes when he does. Now, he is questionable, so pay attention to news. But once again, in this spot versus ATL, where it's, pace up spot, they're not great versus small forwards. They allow a decent amount of steals and blocks, and that's really where a lot of his value comes from. Over the last 20 games, he averages 3.2 steals and blocks. Over the last 5, that's up to 4.2, mainly because he's just playing more minutes. 34 minutes per game over his last 5, 31.6 over his last 20 starts. And I think it's a spot, again, where we can expect 33, 34 minutes, and I am intrigued at low ownership. Another one we got to talk about, Damian Lillard. One of the things that I find interesting since Doc Rivers has taken over, Giannis has been playing pretty much the whole time. He hasn't sat out any games, but he's playing like 38 minutes a night. So his minutes have gone up with Doc. And it's actually the same thing with Damian Lillard. So we have him at 36.5. I think we might be able to add a minute and a half to that as far as projection wise. And when you do that, a team that's already without Chris Middleton, so his 1.12 ends up being more like 1.25 without Middleton. Then you add a couple minutes on top of that, and it starts to look really, really interesting for Dame at pretty much an unowned spot in a great game environment versus Denver, which should be a close game, should go down to the wire. And obviously, if we're lucky enough to see overtime there, then you just get pluses on top of that. So it also gives you a little more flexibility if there's some late injuries. So I definitely like that. And lastly, Jeremy Sochan. I do worry a little bit. He's been terrible lately, but 29 minutes in all 4 games here, coming off a string where he played really well. He has a ceiling. He can do a lot of different things with the ball. And Toronto hasn't been great versus the starting power forward. He is PG power forward eligible. It's just an interesting spot for me. I'll have a little, not, going out of my way to grab him. Point guard on DraftKings, we got Trey Mann, 19% owned. 4,600. Look, he's just playing enough minutes at a point guard spot where he becomes interesting. Don't mind going there versus this Pacers team whatsoever. Keaton George, he's cheap. He's also playing some minutes, 30 minutes, 27, 25. Don't mind that, but I do prefer Chris Dunn just because Chris Dunn produces at a much higher limit or level, and if he gets a couple extra minutes, goes a lot longer than George's couple extra minutes. So I like that spot. Also got to bring up Mikic here, coming off the bench. He played 26 minutes with the Hornets last game. I do expect him to be in that 24-26 range. And at 3.9K, it's a little bit interesting. And on to matchup tool. So we got Amon Thompson, Kobe White, Trey Jones at the top of it. I do like Jones. Mon Thompson, we got to talk about. He's 6.7K on FanDuel. He's into the 7s on Draftkings. Not getting a ton of him on Draftkings. I would probably get a little bit here on Draftkings, whereas I'm not getting much on FanDuel. Simply put, he's, produced at a very good level all year round as far as a fantasy per minute. And wouldn't shy away just because he had a couple, less than stellar starts, and don't mind going to the Knicks against the Knicks that are pretty heavily banged up. Trey Jones, I like. Trey Mann, we talked about. Now let's get into shooting guard. So Emmanuel Quickly, Colin Sexton, Amon Thompson. 7.5K, a little too much for me on Thompson here, but we do got some pivots to go over. We talked about the two others, but I'm going to touch on Kelly Oubre, 6.5K, 39 minutes and 40 minutes the last two games, which is just a huge amount of minutes. Now, the other thing here is Tobias Harris is questionable this game. If he sits out, I think he's going to get a lot of minutes again, and Oubre is interesting in that spot if he's getting all the minutes. It is a very tough matchup, but I'm intrigued to go there at no ownership. And shooting guard on DK, we got Mikik, Vassell, and DeJounte Murray. DeJounte Murray is a little cheap for his ceiling and what he is able to do. 7.7K for a guy that's lived in the 40s and then has, that 60-point ceiling. It's probably a little bit too cheap. Understand why people are going there. RJ Barrett is a bit interesting at 7K in a matchup versus the Spurs, which he should play all game, and honestly been absolutely living in that 40 range. So, that's 6x at this price. So I think you got to be a little intrigued for Barrett on DK. And matchup wise, Kyrie Irving, Gary Trent, KCP, Donovan Mitchell. Irving's a guy that I've liked quite a bit. My one issue is with Doncic there. His ceiling's a little harder to reach. Now, he's still been right around that 50 spot range, so I don't mind going there as a 50 burger, goes a long way in lineups, even if it's at 8.8K. Now, small forward on FanDuel, Scotty Barnes, DeMar DeRozan, Jonathan Kuminga, Bilal Coulibaly. I like all, so I'm getting a little chalky here at small forward. Scotty Barnes, I think, is an interesting spot. That ceiling is just huge for 8.7K, and in a good spot versus the Spurs. Don't mind going there whatsoever, and he can do so much with that ball. DeMar DeRozan, come on, it's versus the Hawks, and you're still at 8K. You just had almost a week straight of games putting up 50 burgers. How can you not want to go there a little bit? I'm not scared off by a little bit higher ownership there, too. He's just still priced too cheap. Jonathan Kuminga, guy's been absolutely killing it. Now he's against the Jazz, 240 total. They're 29th overall versus power forward. If these minutes are continuing and how well he's been playing with Steph Curry, you got to like the spot. Don't mind going back there. Bilal, 4.5K is probably a little bit cheap. Played 30 minutes off the bench the other day when he started, played 33. And really, he's been in that 30-minute range now for a little bit. So that alone at 4.5K is going to make you pretty interesting. Especially you add in the fact that he does have a pretty solid ceiling when he gets it going. So pretty intrigued by Bilal. And Denny, if you guys have been watching this, he is a guy I like to play, especially when those minutes start to trend up. And what do you know? Since the trade deadline, 42 minutes and 39 minutes. Those minutes are way up. We haven't projected for like 32 minutes. I think that's fairly safe, even though he's been right around 29 minutes on the year. But he is a guy that can do it in a lot of ways. Rebounds, assists, points. If his shot is falling, he can definitely get there. So I like Denny. Like the ceiling opportunity. The fact that he can get 50s at 6.7K is fairly intriguing to me. And Kyle Kuzma is another guy that we go to a lot. But look, the guy is in the mid 40s frequently. And now he's in a huge spot versus the Mavericks, which play at a fast pace. Not great versus power forward. I really like this spot for Kuzma. A guy that can do well. And with them being limited at the center position still, he could see a little center tonight, which definitely just helps him there. So don't mind going there whatsoever. And we talked about Oubre. Moving on to DraftKings at small forward. DeMar DeRozan, Denny, Chris Dunn. Talked about them all. And we'll just head right back to the matchup tool. Max Strus. We got Julian Champagny. I do want to bring up that he did play a couple games last week where he got an extra couple minutes, got into that 24, 25, 26 range. And if that happens in this spot, which he absolutely could do it, he starts to get a little bit interesting on DraftKings at 3.6K. Barrett, Brandon Miller, all interesting. Getting over to power forward. Scotty Barnes, Jared Allen, Jonathan Kuminga. Jared Allen, I don't mind this spot. It is against Paul Reed. It's not Joel Embiid. And versus Reed, center's been doing a little bit better. The other thing is that Mo Bamba is questionable. And Reed gets in foul trouble. If Mo Bamba, doesn't play, Reed gets in foul trouble. There is a path to Jared Allen having a very good matchup in this spot. So I don't mind going to Allen. High 7.8 for a guy that's been in the 40s, 50s, 60s a lot lately. I don't mind that at all. Kuminga we covered. Denny we covered. Pascal Siakam. Dude's been playing extremely well with the Pacers. Has couple 50s. One high 40s, pretty much a 50. And then outside of that, been low-ish 30s. Now, he's only 7.9K, so we're really paying for that ceiling. And this is a matchup that he absolutely can get there. Almost a 240 total. I don't mind going there whatsoever. Kuzma we talked about. Sochan we talked about. Moving over to power forward on DraftKings. DeMar DeRozan, way too cheap. Victor Wembanyama, too cheap at 8.9K. Draymond, too cheap at 5.9K. He can get you 50s if he goes into overtime and plays a ton. But really, 5.9K and he's living in that mid-30s. I don't mind taking there. That's right around 6X where he's at frequently. And now he's in a good spot. So the one issue in this spot, Jazz do typically play kind of big. If he's starting at center, he's giving up a huge size disadvantage to the Jazz. So I do worry about the Warriors changing up the lineup here a little bit, maybe to try and get a little bigger. And that is one worry for this. So pay attention to the starting lineup for the Warriors today. Power forward matchup tool, Kyle Kuzma, Jonathan Kuminga, Derek Jones. Derek Jones no longer has to compete with Grant Williams for some minutes. However, they got PJ Washington, they got Daniel Gafford, so his minutes are still very, very unclear, and I don't really love going there not knowing he's going to get minutes. Center spot, FanDuel, Jared Allen, Marvin Bagley, Draymond Green. Talked about them all except for Bagley, so we'll touch on that. Bagley, back from injury, only played 15 minutes. Not sure if he was just on a minutes restriction, exactly what was going on there. If there's news that he's, a full go and he can get, 30 minutes or so, he's interesting. I have some worries about the minutes in this spot, though. But he does produce very well for fantasy basketball when he's on the court. So slight intrigue there, but I do worry about minutes. So I do got a couple pivots here for center. I really like a lot of guys that aren't that high owned. Vucevic. When the guy gets minutes, he straight up produces. He's been getting a ton of minutes lately. We haven't projected for 36. Versus the Hawks, Okongwu doesn't play great D, so I really do like this spot. Okongwu has also been playing a ton of minutes, so if Vucevic is matching up there, I like it quite a bit. 8.5 K, a guy that's been mid-40s all the time, has that 50, 60-point ceiling, is super intriguing. Jacob Poeltl. Spurs haven't been great versus center. They've been allowing 20 points a game. Now, this is a guy that if he gets into 20 real points, he's going to be hitting 40 at least fantasy points, and I like this spot for him quite a bit to score, and then add some rebounds and do all that. My one worry here is that Kelly Olynyk is active. He did play last game, and with that, Poeltl only played 21 minutes. Now, it was a blowout, so he wouldn't have got his full allotment of minutes, but I do worry that he's back to playing like 28 minutes, not like the 33, 34 that we saw him for these run of like 40-point games, which brought his salary up to 6.6K. Jonas Valanciunas, 6.5K, so his price is a near minimum. Guy hasn't been playing a ton of minutes, but when he gets his extra run, he has big games. Now, this is totally one that he could. Memphis is terrible against the center lately, and Jonas Valanciunas can absolutely dominate when somebody is bad versus center. Can get into the mid-40s at 6.5K, so I'm very intrigued to take some swings versus the spot. The other thing is that Zion Williamson is questionable. If Zion's out, Jonas Valanciunas tends to play some extra minutes as it is, so definitely pretty intrigued by Jonas, and I'm going to be watching the news later in the day to see what the situation is there with Zion, and hopefully, push that projection up slightly with a couple extra minutes. So that'll do it for us today. Actually, sorry, DraftKings center, we got Wemby, Green, Miles Turner. Miles Turner is interesting to me at 6.1K on DK. If he gets 29, 30 minutes versus the Hornets, can absolutely crush on that price. And matchup tool-wise, Brook Lopez, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Miles Turner. Do gotta say there's some intrigue for Jackson at 8.3K for a guy that's absolutely been living in the 40s with 50-point upside. Isn't too shabby. Now that'll do it for us, guys. Have a good one. We will be back tomorrow and Wednesday, and then starts into All-Star break. So we got a short week of NBA DFS this week. Have a good one. Be back tomorrow. Peace, guys.